Hello, and welcome to the Sound on Sound podcast channel about electronic music and all things synth. I'm Rob Puricelli, and in this episode, I talk with Matt Johnson, one of the most talented and prolific keyboard players of the last 20 years, mostly as part of the legendary Jamiroquai, in which he both writes and performs, and more recently as a YouTube channel host where he demonstrates the latest bits of synthesizer tech and has amassed more than 100,000 subscribers. I started by asking Matt how and when he managed to get his first big break.
When I got into my early 20s, I decided to make the move to London. So I moved to London and I just started off by just busking on the street to pay my rent, and did a couple of years of that, and then started to get to know some people, and it all just slowly kind of snowballed. It wasn't a big meteoric rise at all. It was all bit by bit. And by the time I was sort of in my 20s, I was gigging 5-6 nights a week out in London and getting to know people.
So when was the first kind of real big break for you? I mean, you say you're gigging a lot. When did you first start to think, I'm now a full-time musician, I can maybe pick and choose what I want to do?
Yeah, sort of like 24, 25, something like that. I was working a lot, but I still hadn't had any really big gigs. But I did do a couple of tours of Japan with an artist called Alicia Laverne, who was an R&B singer who was not famous in England, but massive in Japan. So, that was great fun. Came back from doing that. And so the way I got my first real big break was actually someone recommended me to audition for Miss Dynamite. Do you remember Miss Dynamite?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, they already had a keyboard player, but they were looking for a second keyboard player. And I went to the audition and they liked me. But in the end, they decided they didn't need a second keyboard player because their other keyboard player was so good. But in that band was Stuart Zender and Simon Katz, who were in the original Jamiroquai. And then when Toby, who was my predecessor, the original Jamiroquai keyboard player, when he left, they recommended me. So that's how I got to audition for it.
How did it feel going into a band that's so big? Was that daunting?
I kind of just took it in my stride, really. But it was, it was in a way, because I got the gig. I auditioned. There was like 2 days of auditions, and obviously I got the job. And then a week later, we were going to be going on tour, into these massive festivals all over Europe, like 40,000 jobs. And but before that, we had to do a TV show as well, which with a totally different set, because it was like the early stuff for the TV show. So that was pretty daunting. Like 1 week to learn 2 sets was quite full on, Yeah.
When you started with Jamiroquai, what was your rig at the time? Because I'm imagining that they have a certain sound. So did you have to adapt your rig from what it had been before to something new?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I had a Rhodes. I had a Fender Rhodes Stage, which I did use, and I had a Roland JP 8000. Mm-hmm. Remember those? Which is great synth actually.
Yeah.
Which was my only polysynth that I owned at the time.
Right.
But they had some gear, so I used some of their gear because Toby had been using a Yamaha Motive 8. So I used that, and also a Nord lead. So that was my initial rig, was the Rhodes, the JP 8000, and then on the right I had the Motive 8 and the Nord lead above it.
You mentioned the motif there, and I recently saw a video where you're doing sound banks for the montage. So have Yamaha workstations, always been a mainstay in your setup?
Yeah, I didn't have one before because I couldn't afford one, but when I got that Motif 8, I really loved it. And it's funny, I grew up loving Yamaha because my dad was a Yamaha dealer. So he used to sell Yamaha organs. So it was a name that I was always kind of felt like, yeah, you can trust Yamaha. Anyway, so yeah, I got into the motif, and I feel like the montage is fantastic. I think they've really taken it up another level with that. And I love that keyboard.
Not only are you the keyboard player for Jamiroquai, but you're also a songwriter as well, because your name appears on many co-writes with the band on their albums. How did that come about? Was that just a kind of a natural progression from being the keyboard player, or?
Yeah, kind of, because Toby, who I replaced, he had written all the songs with Jay. So Jay was very used to working with a keyboard player. And yeah, when I joined, he very generously straight away sort of involved me in the writing process. I mean, obviously I did the tour with them and I established myself throughout that tour. It went on for a year and a half or something like that. It was a really big tour. And, I obviously got to know Jay a bit. He got to know what I was all about, sort of thing. And then when it came to start the Dynamite album, yeah, he involved me and we went on lots of writing trips all over the world. Like we went to Costa Rica for a month to there's like a mansion on a cliff top in the middle of nowhere. It's crazy, near the rainforest. And we went to a place called Milano Marissima in Italy as well. And there was, it was probably 90% partying, 10% writing. But slowly it did come together. And yeah, I was very involved in that album. I think I co-wrote about 9 of the 11 songs, something like that. And then really on the last album is when I've had the most involvement, because that was basically just me and Jay. We when he was starting, he just said, look, I just want to write with you for a month. So I said, look, you got to book me up for a month and we'll do it. So we did like a 9 to 5 every day for a month. And it was wicked. It was like we sort of broke the back of the album in that month, really. We were both completely exhausted by the end of it. And, writing with him's great fun. He'll usually come in with an idea on his phone or something like that. He might have a riff or he might have a melody or both, and we'll work that out. And very often, that might end up morphing into something totally different, but there's always some starting point that he's got. Then I might make suggestions, and especially the last album, we really collaborated nicely in it. It just naturally found its way into a song,
And how about yourself as a musician? I noticed that you've got a new release that's just kind of come out. So you're doing things outside of Jamiroquai. What sort of things have you got sort of on the go?
Yeah, I mean, I've got so many things on the go. Well, I've made a solo album a year or so ago called With the Music, which you can check out. A little plug for you there, folks. You can buy it on Bandcamp. And I did a run of vinyl with it, and I'm doing another run because that one sold out, and it's on Spotify. So I'm now making a second solo album at the moment, and I'm thinking of going out on the road doing some dates on my own with a band, which would be cool. But I do a lot of writing with other people. I've been recently writing with Dizzy Rascal. Yeah, I've been writing with a DJ called Purple Disco Machine. We actually had a very successful song a couple of years ago. It's had about 300 million streams, which is a big dance track.
So what are your go-to keyboards today in 2022? What if you could go in and say, right, I'm going to go out somewhere and I'm going to take these machines? What's the top of your list?
Well, I mean, it so depends on what I'm doing. What the gig would be. If it's with Jamiroquai, I mean, I'll talk you through my last rig that I had. I had a Fender Rhodes, the Suitcase Mark 1, and on top of that, I had a Yamaha Montage 6. And the Montage 6 was connected to an OB6, the sequential OB6. So I had that in a little desktop. So that was cool because I could have them both running, like the right hand could be the Montage, the left hand could be the OB. So it was really flexible because I'd sampled some things off the record, so they went into the Montage, or I'll be using the Montage's own sounds, and then the OB on the left, for instance. And then on the right-hand side of my rig, I had the Montage 8, and above that was the Prophet 6. And I did some fun stuff with the Montage 8 as well, because I had a side chain feed going in, or an audio input going in, basically, and they could send it to me, anyone from the band, into the Montage. So I mostly used it for the kick drum. So like the kick drum was coming in and I could sidechain my keyboard pads and stuff live on the montage, which was really cool. And then, like, for instance, on one part of the show, I had one of the backing singers feeding into the montage, and I'd vocode her voice and turn it into chords. So I could do some really cool stuff with that, where I'm probably one of the few people using all hardware. I know so many people use Mainstage and all that stuff these days, but I swear by the hardware. I love it, I really love it.
It doesn't interest you using, software live? Is that because
not at all?
Is it because of the sound or the feel or the reliability or the lack of reliability?
It's all of those things.
All of that.
Yeah. I feel like plugins all tend to sound quite the same to me. I'm not saying they don't sound good. You can get great sounds out of plugins, but like if I listen to whatever, they've all got a very similar quality. The Jupiter 8.1, the Prophet 5.1, for me, they all kind of have the same sort of sound to them. They don't ping out like hardware does. And like I'm super sensitive about latency, so I can't handle any kind of latency. So that would turn me off. And yeah, just I suppose I'm not really worried about crashing because these days computers are so solid. I'm sure that's not really a problem. But yeah, I just love having my hardware.
And one more question about kind of you as a performer. If there was any artist, any band that just phoned you up one day and said, "Hey, we'd love you to come out," who would you want that to be? What's your dream gig?
Well, probably most of them are dead already.
Well, even so, yeah.
If I could have played for Prince, obviously that would have been a dream gig.
Yeah.
Steely Dan. I mean, I guess they're still going.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I would love to do that. Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
I mean, we watched Stevie Wonder. We supported Stevie Wonder in Rio. It was amazing. It was like 130,000 people. And he came on after us and he played for 3 hours straight. And it was just so great. It's one of the best gigs I've ever seen. Yeah. So, I'd love to play with someone like that. Sting, I've got a lot of respect for. He's always had an amazing band.
Yes.
He's another one I saw live once in Costa Rica and he was incredible. Incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny because in the early days of Jamiroquai, Jay's vocal was compared quite a lot to Stevie's, but particularly younger Stevie.
Yeah.
And so it's cool that you guys got to hang out and play together as well.
Yeah, there was mutual respect there. Stevie actually said to Jay that he wanted to write with him. He wanted to do some writing with him.
Cool.
But I think maybe Jay was a bit intimidated by the idea of that, because obviously Jay loves Stevie. Like, who doesn't love Stevie? He's phenomenal. But there's definitely was some similarities. Jay's got that real high voice that can really get up there, like Stevie has.
Your audience has grown exponentially. The Matt Johnson audience I'm talking about now, because in the last few years, you started a YouTube channel that has just gone from strength to strength. And now your videos, they just pop up everywhere. Whenever a new synth comes out, you tend to get hold of one and you demonstrate it, and you demonstrate it from a musical perspective, from a performance perspective, rather than getting into the deep technical stuff about filters and envelopes and oscillators. You talk about it as from a performance level. So just tell us a little bit about how the whole YouTube thing started and how you got to over 100,000 subscribers now.
Yeah, well, it was my wife that sort of dogged me into doing it. She started doing the YouTube channel first. She's got her own one, which took her ages to build up, but she's now got it up to about 82,000 followers, which is amazing. And she kept saying to me, you should do YouTube. You should do YouTube. And I was, no, it's not for me. Because I'm quite a humble type in a way. I'm not someone who loves to show off or whatever. So I wasn't sure that it would come over. But I think when I got the Moog 1, or when I was looking at getting the Moog 1, is what made me realise that there's no one, or at that time there was no one on YouTube that was really demonstrating these synths in the way that I wanted to hear them. There'd be very techno things. There'd be someone just opening and closing a filter, like you say. But there wouldn't be someone really playing with it, the sort of stuff that I would be interested in doing. And then I realised that if I felt like that, then, there must be lots of other people that feel like that. And obviously these days, there's hardly any music shops. Certainly in England, there's almost none. So if you want to check out a synth, you can't really go and see it. You've got to kind of, I've got to travel a long way, but you're most likely to check it out by going on YouTube and having a listen. So that got me started. I didn't take it that seriously. I just started doing it. And I suppose because there was so much interest in the Moog 1, that really took off, straight away. And yeah, that just got me started doing it. Okay, I started showing around a few other synths. And then I thought, oh, well, what else can I do with this? And I was quite reticent about giving tips, teaching and stuff, because I've always thought I'm a useless teacher. Other people seem to think I'm a good teacher. So I started to do just little tips about things that I knew, because I think being a musician, when you're starting out, you feel like you've got to learn to play giant steps or do those really difficult things. That's what it's all about. But I think when you become a pro, you realise that it's the very small details that make the difference between a good and a great musician. It's those little nuances. And I noticed that wasn't being taught much either. So I started doing that, and people just seem to love it. They really do seem to enjoy it.
How do you manage to grow the channel so rapidly? Is it? Do you think it is purely the quality of the content, or do you put a lot of effort into sharing links, doing the whole social media thing?
Not really, yeah. When I do it, what I do is I do the video and I do a little clip, an ad from that video, and I put it on my Instagram and I put it on my Facebook, and that's it, basically. It's been very organic, to be honest. I've not been hammering it away, going, I've got to make this work at all. It's just happened very naturally. And I think... I don't know, people just seem to take to me, which I feel very, very flattered and humbled by, to be honest.
When I saw your videos, I thought the very fact that you were not a typical YouTube personality, where it really is, kind of very manufactured, and they do clearly think about what they're doing to gain the numbers. And it was just you, a keyboard player with clearly massive skills, just sat at an instrument, playing it, going through the patches, talking about the cool features that you warmed to because you were coming at it from that performance perspective. And I think that's what really, I think a lot of people have picked up on why I see you've been so successful is because of that humble humility and that just kind of simplicity,
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it's a classic example of, don't be afraid to be yourself, because you'll be surprised. People like people to just be natural and be themselves and just be relaxed. And I think when you watch stuff like that, it's more relaxing to watch it than when someone's trying to hype you up, and that can kind of get in your face and get on your nerves a bit. I just be myself. I can't do anything else. I can only be myself, Yeah.
You've had your hands on some really cool gear over the last few years. Has there been, apart from the Moog 1, has there been anything that's really stood out to you as, not to say groundbreaking, but certainly, innovative and new and exciting?
Well, it's not so new now, but I've only got with it like a couple of years ago, the Octatrack, the Electron Octatrack. I think that's a fantastic bit of gear. And it just really changes the way you think about making music. I found it really frustrating to learn how to use it, but
a lot of people say that.
Yeah, I can see that probably a lot of people give up without ever getting a sound out of the thing. But it does reward the time, because it's just got this very robotic way about it that's just, for me as a musician, I always find it interesting when something takes me out of my musical world, because you can get bored with yourself. I can play great, but it's like I know what I sound like, and I get bored of the sound of myself, So I love a bit of gear that's going to sort of just break me out of that and inspire me in a different way. And so I've really enjoyed that bit. I've been playing with the Wardorf Iridium recently as well, which is a absolutely mind-blowing bit of gear, for getting futuristic sounds. It's fabulous. I love it. Apart from that, the Prophet 5, obviously, it's nothing new, but it sounds beautiful, and I use that in my workflow because I do a lot of sessions, and that's one that I find just always fits nicely in a mix. And I've really got into using pedals a lot lately. Jam, I don't know if you've heard of Jam pedals. They reached out to me a while ago and they sent me a load of pedals, which I love, and I've just been really enjoying just experimenting with that. Like, for instance, having a stereo out of the keyboard, just putting an effect on one side of it. You know what I mean? And it can just make such a difference to a very basic sound. I think people always look to get a new keyboard or the newest thing, but sometimes it's like just something as simple as putting a pedal on your old Juno 6 or whatever is going to open up whole new worlds for you,
It does seem to be a trend that's kind of come back, because I always saw keyboard players with maybe a reverb or a chorus back in the days when synths didn't necessarily come with built-in effects.
Right.
And then it kind of went away the more, sort of, I guess from the M1 and the D50 onwards, where they had, really good quality effects built in. All that kind of stuff went away. But there seems to have been, over the last few years, a resurgence of using guitar pedals. The Strymon stuff gets used a lot in the synthesizer world. And I guess that's just a sign of, the times, really.
Yeah, I think it does open up different things. It's not too expensive to get a pedal as well, which is cool. And I actually like things that another little pedal I got a while ago was the I think it's called the Lightbox, and it's a spring reverb. It's just a little spring reverb that does different sort of effects with it. So it's not like those kind of posh reverbs that are on keyboards almost sound a bit dated these days, don't they? Do you know what I mean? They can be a bit silky and it's like
a bit too good.
It's a bit too nice,
Yeah.
Whereas chuck a spring reverb on almost anything and straight away it sounds quite vibey. So I like those things that almost beat it up a little bit and, just give it some more character.
Yeah. I think there's definitely, there's always been a trend since we got into this wonderful, glossy, high bit rate, high sample rate world, where many artists are looking now to dirty things up again, grunge things up again.
Yeah, it's always been the same.
Yeah. So we spent years trying to get as clean and as crystal clear as possible, and now we just want to throw a tape saturation plug-in on, or a bit of distortion, or even the Prophet 5 with its vintage knob. And I think the Polybrute as well has this. I can't remember what they call it now, but it introduces that
tuning,
kind of
that artifacts.
Yeah,
and I was just going to say, I do notice, because I've got like a few old bits, like I've got the OBXA, for instance, the Oberheim, and it's just like every time you play a note on it, it's the envelope's different and the filter's a bit different, and that is what makes it sound so massive, I think. So obviously they've got their heads around that now, and they're trying to emulate it. I didn't like the slop version they had, the slop thing on sequential stuff, but I think the vintage knob is much more. They've done it in a better way on that one.
I think they've understood the bad bits that are the good bits, if you know if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's not, you don't want just a big detune button, because that actually sounds a bit dated now as well. But you just want that little bit of out of kilter, gives it some character, and I think it catches your ear as well. Actually,
yes.
Yeah.
I think humans are naturally drawn to slight imperfection, aren't they? And
absolutely,
I think you can hear it.
I agree. I mean, that's why all my productions, there's out of tune stuff, because I can't stand productions that are just completely in tune. I just think it's so boring. It's like you say, it's so perfect, it just washes over you like glass. Whereas a little imperfection will catch your ear.
I was talking to a friend the other day about synthesizer development, and certainly over the 80s and the 90s, it seemed like every morning you'd wake up and there'd be something new and exciting, a new technology, a new way of doing things. And since the turn of the millennium, that seems to have really slowed down to a point where there's just no real innovation going on. We're just rehashing the old ideas over and over again. And we've seen analog have its resurgence. Now we're seeing digital with its kind of resurgence. There's lots of FM synthesizers coming out, wavetable synthesizers, and so on. What would you, as an artist, like to see happen with music technology? Is there something you would like to see come back that hasn't been, or that that had a moment in the spotlight and then went away, or is there something new and exciting that you would like to see under your hands in the near future?
Well, it's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it, but it's been interesting. Like I said, I was messing around with that Iridium lately, and I was really enjoying the digital quality of it, And I think, obviously, we've had so many great remade analogs, which is wonderful, but you don't always want an analog sound. It just doesn't work for everything. So I guess, for me, it would be something that is a bit more of a Frankenstein's kind of thing, Take the good things from the analogs, which some people have done this as well already, I guess, having a nice filter from an analog. But sometimes you don't want a nice filter. Sometimes you want a nasty filter. So I think these things where you can, like I said, that's why I was quite into the Iridium, because it's got different ways of, it's got FM, it's got wavetable, it's got fake kind of analog, digital. So I'm finding those things interesting at the moment, and I'm more interested in how the way modulation matrices these days have got so good. I think that's been quite a recent innovation, that they're really easy to use now. Before they'd just really be daunting to like, I've got an Alesis Andromeda. It's like, you need to get a BA honours to sort of like work out how to use it. It's very, very difficult. You can get great sounds out of it, but half the time you don't know how you did it. Whereas now they've made it so easy that you just twist one knob and then you can assign it to there, and you start to get the idea of that. So I feel that where that's going is the most interesting thing. It'd be great to see something like, obviously people have got into modular gear a lot. I haven't got the patience for it personally, or the space, frankly. But I like the idea of these new compact synths. They can do everything that a modular can, really. In theory they could anyway. So maybe that's the future, where these modules all exist, but they're all just within the digital, sphere, I guess.
Tell me about your studio at home. How is it set up for you to record it? What's your rig, and what do you use in terms of recording? Hardware, software, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I've got a Pro Tools HDX rig, and the sound card is a Apogee Rosetta 800. It's about 1 million years old, but it still works fine. And I've got that going into a SSL X Logic rack. It's just like an 8-channel summing thing, but it's got the G series compressor with it, which is nice. And then for preamps, I've got like a GML 4-channel preamp. That's what I use for most things, because it's just super transparent and very high quality. And I've also got a Fermionic Culture early bird preamp as well. So if I want to put some valves and colour on it, I use the early bird. For everything else, I use the GML. Then what else have I got? I've got like a Phoenix, another Fermionic Culture Phoenix compressor, which is a great mastering compressor. But actually I track through it quite often. If I want to warm up the keyboards, or I put my Rhodes through it quite often. It's really creamy sounding. Then what else have I got? I've got a Uri 1176 original one, and a distressor I've got, which I like that on keyboards, actually, distressor, because I like the distortion on that is quite cool. Sort of more saturation, can sound really good, I find, on synths. And then I've just got a few nice quality microphones, for when I'm recording vocalists and stuff. And just all the keyboards are just all in the room, so it's very easy to just plumb one out, plumb the other in.
What's the first one you turn on if you want some inspiration or something?
Well, I mean, the montage, the Yamaha montage, is at the centre of my studio, because I use it as a master keyboard as well, and I love the action on it, And I've got a lot of good sounds that I've programmed in there, so that'll be the first thing I always switch on. And then, they go through, they're like children, there's sometimes I favour one, sometimes the other. Yeah. I find the Prophet tends to be there quite often, and the Jupiter 8. When I'm doing sessions, I'll just stick with the ones that I know that are going to give me results, So the Jupiter 8, the Prophet are my first two analogs, and if they're not working out, then I might get out the Oberheim. It's just so big that I don't like taking it out, but it does sound fabulous for the right thing. And then obviously the Moog one does get used a lot. I work for one particular producer a lot, and he loves the sound of it, so I use it a lot on that. And the Vintage Vibe, I guess. Those are my most used bits of gear.
What bit of gear don't you have that you would love to have?
I suppose there's a few, like the Elka Synthex is pretty cool. Jay's got one, so I have used it in the studio, because he's got an amazing collection of vintage synths. And then maybe I haven't got an ARP Odyssey, so I wouldn't mind getting one of those. At some point, I'll probably try and get one of those. To be honest, I feel like I've got everything I need, really. There's the other thing I like string machine. I like a ARP, like Selena string machine. Even though it only makes a couple of bad sounds, they're just so nostalgic.
What about Desert Island synth? Somebody said you can only take one synth with you. What's it going to be?
Well, it's tricky, isn't it? Well, what I would do is I'd sample all my synths via Sample Robot, and then I'd bring the montage.
Good answer. Good answer. Tell me a little bit about your sound programming skills. And you've recently launched a pack with Yamaha for the montage, but you've done some other stuff with other manufacturers. Tell us a little bit about how you go about programming for different synthesizers.
Yeah, well, I've actually just done them off my own back, and I'm just selling them on my website. But I've done a set of patches for the Prophet 6 and the Obi 6, and also the little Take 5. The Take 5 they've got? Yeah. And again, it's the sort of thing that I just try and program the sort of sounds that I want to get from a synth, because I'm someone, I don't really like using presets. I very rarely use presets. I like to personalize my sounds, but I often feel that the presets are not great on synths. It's not that often, just for me anyway. They don't speak to me. So I'm just trying to make the kind of sounds that people who are like-minded with me will get turned on by. They'll load them in, and it will give their synth a new lease of life. It's really enjoyable. And again, it's about usability. So not sounds that you press one key and black holes open up and you fall in. Just sort of like simple pads that you want, or whatever it is. A sync lead, whatever it is. Just a very good version of basic sounds, which, let's face it, 99.9% of records that we hear are made up of those sort of sounds, not the kind of crazy stuff, which is great. Don't get me wrong, I love it as well. But that's what I try to provide things. And as a player, I've got a sensibility of what's going to be a nice thing to play, I think.
Well, what's your starting point? You approach a synthesizer, say, for example, it's a polyphonic analog. What inspires you to start and go down a particular road? Do you sit down and say, okay, I'm going to do 50 sounds for this thing, I'll do 10 basses, 10 leads, 10 pads? Or do you just dive in there and just start twiddling things until something sticks, and then you see that through to the end and then start again?
Yeah, generally like that. That's how I start off, is I just initialize a patch and start playing, whatever I'm feeling like. Yeah, sometimes I might feel like, okay, let's make a bass sound or whatever. But then I just make a ton of sounds, and probably the first 20 will end up getting discarded, or 5 of them will make it, and then I whittle it down, and then I will realise, okay, well, I've got a ton of pad sounds, I haven't got any of this, I haven't got any of that. So I'll try and make a balance like that, But I just really enjoy exploring the synth and looking for the sound, like I say, looking for the kind of sounds I like, because you have to work a little bit hard on these modern synths to make them sound like a proper nostalgic retro vibe. Obviously that's where I'm coming from with Jamiroquai. there's such a 70s influence. So I'm very tuned into that. And having played a lot of vintage synths over the years, both on the Jamiroquai records and my own ones. So I'm into trying to get that same sort of quality out of these modern sounds. But then also try to find some things that the modern sounds can do that obviously the vintage synths can't do. They're so basic compared to, especially now, we're starting to get these more interesting analogs that are coming out with, as we said, the mod matrices, and you can do a lot more with them. I really like being interactive with synths as well, where you've got a sound, but when you flick up the mod wheel and a ton of verb comes in or whatever, it morphs into something else. I really love being interactive with sounds as a performer. When I'm on stage with Jamiroquai, I always used to just, when I was soloing, I'd grab the LFO and I'd start putting out really in an extreme way and change the speed like crazy and make these kind of cosmic sounds, chuck a load of delay on it. So that's kind of very much my style of playing.
What about expression features on synthesizers, such as aftertouch and ribbons and all that kind of thing? Does that float your boat?
Yeah, it does actually. I mean, I can't. This synth that is going to come out soon on my YouTube, it's got a really good poly aftertouch, and it's more useful than some of the previous poly aftertouches. It's kind of a weird thing to get your head around poly aftertouch, but actually it's wicked when especially now that you can program so many things, so that you can hear one note suddenly changes from a square to a saw within a chord. That's incredible. It just opens up whole new worlds. So I'm really excited about all that stuff.
Yeah, that's made a really nice welcome return, hasn't it? Poly aftertouch with certain synthesizers.
Yeah, it's wicked.
It got kind of written off, didn't it? It was
great.
A big thing towards the end of the 70s, early 80s, and then it just got abandoned. And even
well, it's like that Vangelis stuff, isn't it? The CS80 stuff. I mean, a lot of it wouldn't be much without that poly aftertouch in a way.
No, it's nice to see it come back. So, but there are more synthesizers now that have ribbons and poly aftertouch and joysticks and vectors and all that cool stuff's coming back, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I'm into it, and I think the expression pedal is a really good way as well, because obviously it's not taking up any of your hands, so you can, you can do great things with all that stuff. It's really exciting.
So where can we find your sounds?
You can find them on my website, which is mattjohnsonproducer.com. Go to the shop and save up your pennies, get down there, spend lots of money. That'd be lovely.
It's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you, Matt, and thank you ever so much for your time. The best of luck with all your future projects, and come back and talk to us again soon.
Thanks a lot, Rob. It's been a
Cheers.
pleasure.
Thank you for listening, and be sure to check out the show notes page for this episode, where you'll find further information along with web links and details of all the other episodes. Before you go, make sure you visit the Sound on Sound podcast page at soundonsound.com/podcasts, where you can explore all the other great content playing across the other channels. I'm Rob Puricelli, and this has been a failed muso production for Sound on Sound.